Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to my Basics in Chess series. So in this series we follow opening principles, middle game strategies and the endgame strategies. Today we'll do a middle game strategy again, and it is so-called centralization of pieces in the middle game. The centralization of pieces is one of the most important topics while playing the middle game, because the pieces are have of course the best activity on the central square. So it means whenever you have the possibility, you should place your queen, bishop, rook or knight on these four central squares, because the pieces have of course the best of activity. Here the queen, you see, it covers very good diagonals, it covers also some good files and ranks here, so that's why the queen is most powerful here on this square or on this central square. The same idea of course it's for the bishop, for the rook, for the knight also, especially the knight, because then we cover some very good central squares here. We're creating sort of an octopus knight. And while doing that, while doing the centralization, you should really follow some basic rules of this centralization of pieces. First of all, of course, we want to place it on these four central squares. And the more important thing is that you should support these pawns, support these pieces with some pawns. It means when you have maybe a centralized bishop, first of all, you should maybe support it with some pawn on f4 here, on d4. Or you should also sometimes support it with the pawn on c5, because then your opponent cannot play maybe d6 and kick your bishop away from this centralized square. So it means this pawn, if you could just imagine now the position with the pawn on c5 or here maybe on g5, then your opponent cannot play some attacks against your bishop, and you still stay with your centralized piece. But I don't want you to mix up two things about this centralization. Centralization is not an outpost. An outpost is this position when you have maybe placed your knight on a very active square and your opponent doesn't have a minor piece which can challenge your knight maybe here on d6, because your opponent has bishop on the light square, so basically this knight will stay there forever. Here it's an important rule of the centralization, because here black has still the possibility to attack your very well placed piece with this dark square bishop. But when he does it, you should really try this reloading idea of this centralization, because then if your opponent maybe trades off this bishop on d4, then you should reload the square with maybe a knight or maybe a rook. Then you have again a very nice centralized piece, and you continue very in good fashion in the middle game. So you see this reloading idea, it's really important to keep in mind while playing on the centralization, because we want to keep really the tension in the center, to keep the activity in the center, and try really to grab some space and win the chess game, of course. So let's see now a couple of examples of this centralization. Here you see black has a very powerful bishop on d5. Of course, white would try here the move e4 in order to kick away your bishop, and here that's why in the last move queen on c2 was played. But now black tried first knight on b4, kicking away the queen on b1, and here f5. This is now this support of this centralization, because although we are leaving now weakness here on e5, but we have really now a powerful piece, and we want to stay with this piece on this very active square. So that's why here castling was played. Knight on c6, we have bishop on c3, and now queen on e7, rook on d1, and now knight on b8. Now comes this reloading idea, because we want to play knight on d7, maybe then knight on b6 or knight on f6, because if we get challenged, if our opponent maybe plays bishop on f3 and takes off our bishop on d5, then we can reload and again have a very nice centralized knight here maybe on d5, and we're continuing the game with some good central control. So knight on d2 was played. We have this idea, knight on d7, bishop on f3, and now knight on f6. If your opponent tries bishop takes on d5, then of course e takes d5, and then we can centralize our knight here on the square e4. So you see, we are now improving our position. We are going much further, and we are going on the other side of the board. So then it's possible to have another piece centralized on a very active square. So it means we are playing against again on this centralization, which is really important in the middle. Queen on d3 was played here. Black found a nice tactical idea. If you try knight takes on e4, then f takes e4, bishop takes on h2 can be played, and here we can simplify the position. So that's why here queen on e2 was played, and now knight on g5, bishop takes on d5, and now, as mentioned, e takes d5. Now we have the possibility to centralize our knight on e4, which is basically unchallengeable, because if you trade off this knight on e4, then of course f takes e4, we are opening the f file, and white will continue the game with the bad bishop situation. So it's not a favorable endgame here for white. In the game, knight on f3 was played, as said, knight on e4, rook from a to c1, and now c6, of course fixing the position on the queen side. And here rook from a to e8 was played. It's very important now to realize our attacking possibilities here, because we have now really a good activity of our pieces on the king side, where we have the bishop aiming on the king side, the knight aiming on the king side, the rooks now aiming on the king side. So that's why our attack should be coordinated on the king side. g3 was played. Now queen on d7, queen on f1, g5, rook on d3, and now f4, simply trying to open the position. E takes f4, g takes f4, now knight on h4, king on h8, queen on g2. And I'm not going to explain you now all of the possible tactical possibilities here in the middle game. I just wanted to point you out our direction of the attack. We are continuing the attack on the king side without bothering what's going on the queen side. Here we have a very fixed position, so here nothing can happen, so that's why we should continue to attack here. F takes g3, h takes g3 was played, knight on g5, f3, knight on h3 with the check, king on h1, bishop on e7, we have bishop on d2, bishop takes on h4, g takes h4, and now queen on f5, rook on b3 was played, and now rook on g8, very nice move, queen on h2, rook on e6, improving the position of this rook, rook on f1, and now knight on f2, very nice move. It's game over here. If you take with the rook, then of course queen on b1. If you take with the queen, then again queen on h3, and it will be game over. So let's see now how this centralization works. Well, in a later stage of the game. This is now a stage in between middle game and end game. It's a game played by Mikhail Botvinnik against Ilya Abramovich Khan. Here you see white doesn't have such a good position, because here the pawn is weak on f5, so you see this is really our main target here. We have also some double pawns here on c3 and c4, so it means the only idea that we can create here is this centralization. That's why bishop on e4, trying to improve the position of this bishop. Rook on b8, now rook on d1 was played, b6, and now h3, we have bishop on a6, and now bishop on d5. You've seen how powerful this bishop now is on this very active square d5. That's why here b5 was played, c takes b5, rook takes b5, and now c4. Simply with the same idea, supporting now this centralized square, centralized piece. Rook on b6, we have rook on b1, rook on d8, rook takes on b6, a takes, now e4, supporting this pawn now, this bishop now even more. Bishop on c8, we have queen on a4, bishop on d7, and now queen on a7. You see, when we have now this very important piece here, then it's really good to play around that piece, so using the spaces that this piece is covering. Bishop on e8 was played, now rook on b1, of course with the attack. Rook on d6 had to be played. Now simple a4, king on h7, a5. Here we have b takes a5, and now queen takes on a5. We have queen on rook on a6, queen on c5, and here I'm not going to show you the whole game. I hope you realized how white created this very important centralization of this piece. Played then a pawn minority attack here on the queen side, created some weaknesses, and now has really a winning game, because we have now pass pawn situation, and was game over. Let's see now a very important topic in endgames. You see here, white is a pawn up, and it's a game played by Svetozar Gligoric against Wolfgang Unziker. And here, our main idea is to centralize the pieces, because, of course, from black's perspective, we cannot win this endgame anymore because we're pawn down. That's why we should really play actively here, and that's why Wolfgang Unziker played first queen on d3, improving the position of the queen, playing it centrally here. That's why white had to go for this trade of rooks. Rook takes on c8, here queen takes on c8, now king on h7 was played, and now queen on c4. We are not allowing some trades of queens. As I said in my previous endgame video, you shouldn't trade off pieces when you're pawn down. You should trade off. You should trade pawns down. If the position gets then simplified, then it's a drawish endgame here. King on h2 was played. Queen on d2. We have queen takes on f7, but now queen on d4, g4, a5, simply improving now the position, staying with the queen in the center, which is important because your opponent cannot checkmate you just with the queen. He needs the support of the king, so that's why it's important to keep the queen central. Then you have this perpetual check possibilities in the continuation. Queen on f5, king on h8, queen on f8 here. Queen on f7 was played, king on h8, now g5. We have h takes g5, f takes g5, but now we have some perpetual check possibilities here, simply playing checks, and after taking this pawn, it was really a drawish game, because white has to be careful also now, because if the king moves forward to this pawn, then we could have ourselves a pass pawn. So you see, white didn't win this game. He had to agree for a draw here. But that was all possible, as I mentioned, because Wolfgang Unziker played on this very early centralization of the queen on d3 and managed to fight for a draw here. Let's see now another example. It's a game played by Richard Teichmann against Mikhail Chigorin. Mikhail Chigorin here with the black pieces. Again, we have the centralized knight, very important piece, supported with some other pieces, and also we have the same idea here, playing f5, not allowing this e4 move. And here, black tried rook on f7. We have castling, and now bishop takes on c3. We have b takes c3. Now comes this move, again supporting the centralized piece with the pawn. You see, we are not allowing this c4 possibilities, because if c4 comes, then we have to go away. We have to remove the knight from the central square, and of course we are not allowing our opponent to do that. In the game, rook on g1 was played, queen on e7, improving the position of the queen. Rook on c1, queen on a3 was played, king on d2, and now b4. Now comes c4, but it's not a problem, because after bishop on a4, queen on b1, and now knight on c3. Very active play here by Mikhail Chigorin. Queen on a1 was played, and now rook on d8, g4, knight on e4 with a check. We have king on e2, knight on c5. Of course you cannot take, because then we can take the bishop. Queen on b1 was played, knight takes on d3, queen takes on d3, now queen on a2, king on f3, but now bishop on c2, and it was game over. There were no good squares anymore for the queen, so that's why here in this position white even resigned. So you see, the centralization of the piece is very important. Here it was even supported with some b5 moves. Let's go back. Here b5, very important move in order to support the centralized piece. Although white has also centralized piece, it was sort of same idea for both sides, for white and black, but here black was more active in the continuation of the game. White castled queenside here, and black used the space in order to create some dangerous attacks. Let's see now another example. It was a game played by Aaron Nimcovich against Heinrich Wolf. Again, we have a very nice centralized piece. We want to play around this piece, although the position is much more simplified, because we have also this opposite colored bishop situation. Here d5 was played by Aron Nimzovic, because after potential e takes d5 and c takes d5, you cannot take, because then we can take with the rook here, the pawn on g7. So that's why here rook on f7 was played. But now d6, very important, we have now a supported pass pawn. g6 was played. Now c5, improving the position of this pawn. Queen on c8, rook on c3, queen on c6, queen takes on c6, b takes c6, and now h4. Here we have king on g8, rook on b3, rook on d7, rook on b8, and here after a couple of moves we are just improving the position of the king here. King on d4, you see we are playing now also on this centralization of the king. Bishop on f3, bishop on h8. You see now white had to give up even the pawn, because the threat was to go much more actively with the king here on e5. So that's why e5, king takes on e5. We have bishop on d5, bishop on f6, bishop on f3, bishop on g5 here, king on g7. But now f5, open the position. We have bishop on g4, f6, king on h7, and now rook on c6. And in this position black resigned. You see how important it was to have this centralized piece, the centralized bishop here on e5. Black's pieces were too passive here in the continuation of the game. Aron Nimzovic, the legendary theoretician in chess, realized these opportunities in an opposite colored bishop game and managed to win very effectively. Okay, I hope you realize these ideas. As I mentioned, this is this outpost situation. This is now this centralization of pieces. Try to reload the piece if you have a good centralized piece. Try to stay onto the centralization. You can maybe place also your rook here on d4. Try to gain some space. Try to stay fixed and firm here in the center of the board, because it's really one of the most important principles in chess. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video, and meanwhile you can watch my other basics in chess videos with some other opening principles, middle game strategies, and the endgame strategies. And you can also watch my chess tactics and chess puzzles videos, in which I show you all of the possible tactical motifs in the middle game that can happen to you. And you can also watch my how to spot chess tactics videos, in which I show you some good ways to realize your tactical possibilities in the middle game. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like the content. Thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.